There's something terrifying about control you never see. The kind that doesn't announce itself with blasters or fire, but with kindness, with calm, with hands folded and eyes lowered. It speaks softly in council chambers and smiles while others bleed. It never rushes, it simply waits. And while the galaxy turns, it tightens its grip. He didn't seize power through war. Not at first. He was invited into it, welcomed even, because fear made him look like safety. Every crisis gave him a chance to offer a solution. Every solution was another thread in the web, and the galaxy mistook the silk for salvation. It wasn't an empire built in a day. It was decades of design. A slow, deliberate poisoning of trust. He didn't need to raise a sword to defeat the Jedi. He just needed to convince them they were still winning, that they still had control, until the very moment they didn't. From Maul to Dooku, from the Clone Wars to Order 66, every piece moved in harmony. Every puppet pulled by strings laced with prophecy and fear. The galaxy fell not because it was weak, but because the one tearing it down was disguised as its only hope. And by the time the mask came off, the damage was done. There was no chaos, only choreography, no rebellion, only roles. Even love was used like a tool, bent until it broke. And what emerged from that ruin wasn't just an empire. It was the illusion that the Sith had already lost, when in truth, they had already won. In this video, we unravel the terrifying elegance of Palpatine's plan, how every sacrifice was calculated, how every enemy was manufactured, how perfection itself became a flaw, and how one man didn't just conquer the galaxy, he made it surrender willingly. There's something chilling about how it all began. Not with a war, or a throne, or a scream in the dark, but with a whisper in a Senate chamber and a flicker of ambition behind careful eyes. Long before clones took up arms, and Jedi fell by the thousands, there was only one man pulling threads, while no one noticed. He didn't need brute strength or armies at his command. He needed patience. 1,000 steps taken one at a time beneath the surface. A conversation here, a betrayal there, the seeds of chaos planted so delicately they looked like peace, and he watched them bloom with silent precision. The Jedi never saw the storm coming. They were too noble, too proud, too blind to see the shadows at their feet. Every move they made was predicted. Every word they spoke was anticipated. He let them believe they were winning, and when they weren't, he gave them just enough hope to keep playing their part. Maul wasn't just a warrior. He was the bait. A phantom menace meant to distract, to wound, to reveal the Jedi's overconfidence. Even his loss served a purpose. The plan needed them vulnerable, and the galaxy needed to believe the Sith were extinct. This wasn't improvisation. This was destiny sculpted by a master's hand. And as the first chapter closed, he had already written the ending, because to Palpatine, time was not a limitation. It was a weapon. The Republic had cracks long before the war. Palpatine just widened them. He fed the bureaucracy while pretending to heal it. He created problems, then positioned himself as the only solution. And every time the Jedi tried to intervene, he made them look like enemies of progress. It wasn't that the Jedi were weak. It was that they were outmatched, locked in rules they refused to break, bound by honor in a game where honor was a disadvantage. They walked into the trap willingly, and every move they made tightened the noose around their own necks. He turned democracy into a performance. He didn't dismantle the system. He weaponized it. Votes became tools. Laws became chains. And while senators argued about taxes and trade routes, he was quietly gutting their power from within. Dooku was never meant to win. He was a cog, a disillusioned idealist molded into a villain, used to scare the Republic into submission. And when his usefulness ended, he was discarded like all the others. The war was never meant to be won, only prolonged. You can almost scream at how clear it all was in hindsight. How every protest, every warning sign, every shift in the Force was ignored, because they never imagined a threat so calm, so patient, so perfect. There was tragedy in every step of his rise, and none more painful than the fall of the Jedi. Not just as warriors or protectors, but as people who believed they were saving the galaxy. They fought for peace, and died in a war designed to kill them. They raised younglings to become guardians, only to send them into battlefields they weren't ready for. They trained Anakin to be the chosen one, then doubted him until it broke him, and Palpatine stood by his side the entire time, waiting for the moment his heart would fracture. Order 66 wasn't just an execution, it was an erasure. A lifetime of wisdom wiped away in moments. Lightsabers silenced, temples burned, the Force cried out, but there was no one left to answer, because the plan was not to fight them. It was to erase the memory of their light. Even the clones were victims. Engineered loyalty, wrapped in brotherhood. But under it all was a single command waiting to be activated. They called the Jedi generals, but in the end, they were just targets. And the soldiers who loved them had no choice but to obey. It hurts to look back on it, Because it wasn't just the fall of an order, it was the death of hope itself. And the saddest part is that it worked so well. What Palpatine achieved was beyond conquest. He didn't just win a war, he made the galaxy beg him to lead. He orchestrated a civil war and came out as its savior. He turned Jedi heroes into traitors and never fired a shot himself. Every choice he made was calculated. Every delay was deliberate. Even his own capture was staged. A performance to solidify Anakin's loyalty, to create a bond that not even the Jedi could break. And when the moment came, it shattered everything in its path. He rewrote the rulebook of power. He didn't need overwhelming strength. He needed inevitability. By the time anyone realized what he was, it was too late. The Empire wasn't a shift. It was a conclusion. And it arrived not with resistance, but with applause. The Sith had waited 1,000 years for revenge, and he delivered it in a single decade, not with rage, but with precision. Not with bloodlust, but with design. He didn't just break the Jedi. He made the galaxy forget they ever mattered. You can almost marvel at it. The artistry of manipulation, the scale of his vision, the sheer audacity of one man believing he could control the stars, and then doing it. But even in perfection, there is consequence, because the tighter a grip becomes, the more things slip through. And in Palpatine's certainty, he created his undoing. He saw weakness in love, in friendship, in hope, and so he dismissed them. Anakin was broken, but not empty. Beneath the armor was still a father, a memory, a spark of something pure that refused to die. And Palpatine, for all his foresight, never saw it coming, because he never believed redemption was real. The empire he built was flawless in its control, but brittle in its soul. Fear maintained order, but never loyalty. And for every planet silenced, 1,000 voices whispered rebellion. Even the Death Star, his ultimate symbol, was born from fear. And it was fear that destroyed it. He tried to outlive his failure, cloning himself into eternity. But eternity cannot erase legacy. And the legacy of tyranny always ends the same, with collapse, with resistance, with something stronger than fear rising from the ashes. This was never just a plan. It was a tragedy. A tale of brilliance consumed by arrogance, of a galaxy tricked into surrendering, only to find its soul again in the most unexpected places. In this video, we traced a path that was never random. Every twist, every betrayal, every loss was part of a design so intricate it felt like fate. But fate had nothing to do with it. This was one man's will made real. One vision that consumed galaxies. Palpatine didn't rise by force. He rose by understanding weakness, exploiting trust, twisting hope until it shattered. And in doing so, he proved that the most dangerous villain is the one who never looks like one until it's too late. His plan was perfect. Too perfect. So flawless, it became fragile. So complete, it left no room for error. And in that perfection was his flaw. The inability to imagine that something he didn't control could still change everything. Because stories are not only about power, they are about resistance. About the spark that survives when the darkness thinks it has one. About the choices made not with certainty, but with faith. And in the end, it was that faith. Not a plan, not a prophecy, but a simple belief that one act of good could undo decades of evil, that truly ended his empire.